What is up, everybody? I'm NoLucksGiven, and today we are going to be looking at the best Pokemon for both raid battles and the Master League. Let's go. Now, this video is a companion to my recent article on Gamepress.gg. If you're not already following along there or just want to also be able to see this video in the written format, you can find a link for that in the video description below. Now, Master League is an extremely expensive league. You're going to have to, if you want to compete with the best of the best, the rank 10 players, you're going to have to max out any Pokemon that you want to use if you want to stay competitive. And the other leagues are going to have Pokemon that you need to max out too, like Azumarill and Bastiodon in the Great League and Registeel in the Ultra League. But not every Pokemon in the other leagues will need to be maxed out. Some you can just catch, evolve, and use immediately. That's what really sets the Master League apart, and it's going to cost a lot of Stardust and rare candy. Now, having said that, I personally didn't spend any Stardust or rare candy, and I'm able to make teams that are competitive at the top levels in the Master League. The reason for that, of course, is I already have all of these Master League Pokemon powered up for raid battles, and I'm just using those ones in the Master League. So that's the first reason that Master League Pokemon good in raid battles might appeal to you. You might already have a lot of these Pokemon that we're going to talk about today. And the second reason, if you don't already have these Pokemon powered up, well, I guess I boil that down to what is the value of a raid pass? Obviously, you can use your raid passes for shiny checking or high IV hunting. You can also use it for the premium track rewards in Go Battle League, though I personally never really advocate for that. The reason for that is you can actually get a lot more value out of your raid passes if you power up your Pokemon, and that value is going to be more or less guaranteed. Obviously, raid rewards fluctuate and there's some randomness, but on average, you actually wind up receiving double the amount of rare candy and TMs and all of those premium rewards by short manning your raid battles. Short manning or low manning is the catch-all term that means you solo a raid when it's soloable, you duo a raid when it's duoable, so on and so forth. And that's because all of the rewards that you get are actually also tied to how many Premier Balls you get during that bonus challenge. And that doesn't include Best Friend or Ultra Friend bonus balls. So the short of it is the sooner you start powering up your Pokemon to start short manning raids, the sooner you'll start earning more premium rewards, and those Pokemon will actually sort to pay for themselves. And yeah, any of the rare candy that you wind up investing, I wrote this in the article too, but you wind up, if you're short manning, getting about 140 rare candy per month, just on average, just by doing your raids, by spending your daily free raid pass. That's not even talking about premiums, just 140 free rare candy per month. And then also, because you're short manning, you're going to get a few more Premier Balls, and that's going to allow you to comfortably Pineapple and catch the raid boss Pokemon and just amass even more legendary candy that way. And all of that is probably already information that you are somewhat familiar with if you clicked on this video. But if you're not already short manning your raids, say you show up to a raid or, you gather your local legendary raid hour crew and there's 20 of you there or there's 18 of you there. There's no reason you guys can't split up into 2 or 3 groups, especially groups by team or something. If you're kind of evenly split, I know that's typically not how it goes. But there's no reason, you can all still talk, you can all still be friends and participate in the legendary raid hour together, help catch for each other, share tips, talk about new Pokemon Go news and stuff like that. But just by separating the raid lobbies that you guys enter in, you're going to double all of your rewards. And basically, if I'm just jumping into a lobby with 20 people, I consider that like using half of my daily raid pass. And think about it right now. Would you be upset if you only got a daily raid pass every other day? No, you'd be like, wait, what's the deal? I'm kind of getting gypped here. Well, if you're not short manning, you are gypping yourself right now because you're only getting half of the rewards out of the raids that you compete in. And you're already driving to them or, maybe walking to them or whatever, but you're taking the time to get your group together. Might as well actually just take the 30 seconds that it would be to split, and you can still comfortably short man these raids. And the other thing, too, that I do hear some people talk about before we get into the Pokemon is people say, oh, I want to save potions, I want to save revives. Well, part of those rewards that you are doubling by short manning are your potions and revives. So you might have to use 1 or 2 more revives, 1 or 2 more potions after a raid, but you're going to get double the rewards by doing that short man. So I definitely recommend it, but let's get into the Pokemon, the reason that you guys all came to this video. Real quick, actually, before we start talking about these Pokemon, 2 quick caveats I wanted to cover. Really common advice that people stress when they talk about Pokemon Go is only power-up stuff that you need right now. Now, obviously, you really want things for Master League, and you also kind of want things for the current legendary raid bosses. The Attackers tier list tries to cover, raid bosses as a whole, so what are going to be the most useful things at any given time, because the raid bosses are always changing, rotating in and out, etc. I tend to be in favor of, though, just powering up what is currently useful, either for the raid weekend or whatever bosses you're struggling with, whatever holes you might have in your teams for those upcoming bosses, things like that. There is some, desire, and I get that, to power up things specifically for the Master League. One of the other reasons that this guide is so important, though, is we don't actually know what the future of the Master League is going to be. So right now we're on the preseason, and we won't see the Master League again until maybe like June or July, and by that time, who knows, we just had that weird shadow Pokemon thing, and who knows what the future of raiding Pokemon and Master League Pokemon are really going to look like a few months from now. But just powering up Pokemon for these 2 weeks might not actually be what you want to do. So it's just a small caveat before we get started. The other caveat is that for PvE and PvP, a lot of times these Pokemon will use the same movesets, but not always. Sometimes certain Pokemon are going to have moves that are better in PvP than they would be in raid content. So if you're ever curious what movesets I'm recommending, you can check out the link to the article, and then from there navigate to any Pokemon's individual pages, and we'll keep those up to date both for raids and for PvP content for what the best movesets are to use. And that's what I always recommend checking out in either case. But that's why I didn't want to, potentially date this video by putting that kind of information in there, because those moves can change, and we typically stay on top of that on the individual Pokemon pages. So now, without further ado, let's actually get into it. And the first Pokemon that I want to talk about are the Ghost/Dark type Pokemon. Now, we group these Pokemon together for raid content. They wind up being a little bit different in PvP, but we group them together for raids because they both deal super effective damage to Ghost type Pokemon and Psychic type Pokemon. So you might have just used some of those for Armored Mewtwo, and then you're also going to be using them for Lugia when that comes during one of March's raid weekends, or for Giratina Altered Form when that returns. And in this group of extremely useful raid Pokemon, most of the Ghost Pokemon are a little bit frail for PvP, but we actually have Giratina in that group as well. And Giratina, the Ghost Dragon Legendary, is one of the best Pokemon in the Master League. It's one of the Dragon Duo that you're going to hear me talk about in this video, and Giratina is just crazy, crazy good in the Master League. It might seem a little bit lackluster if you just look at DPS in raids, and Honestly, if you're just ranking the Pokemon by DPS, yes, it's not going to be the top one. It's going to be behind Darkrai, Chandelure, Gengar, but all of these things don't have nearly comparable bulk to Giratina. And we don't really talk about bulk or TDO, total damage output, in regards to ranking raid Pokemon, but it's one of the reasons that we developed the DPS to the third power times TDO metric for Gamepress.gg. At some point, having a Pokemon that's tanky enough is going to be less re-lobbies, but it's also going to be less Stardust investment. So for that reason, Giratina is really, really insane for raid battles, because for the Stardust that you put into it, you'll wind up getting like 2.5 to 4 Gengars in any given raid, depending on what moves are also coming at you. So I definitely recommend Giratina, both for raid content. I think it's one of the best Pokemon out there. That's why we have it as a 1.5 on the Gamepress Attackers tier list. And it's also insane, one of the Dragon Duo top dogs, best of the best in the Master League. After Giratina, I also listed a few Dark-type Pokemon in this section. Tyranitar, Hydreigon, Darkrai, and then to a lesser extent, Weavile. And all of these things do the same in raid content. They're mostly a little bit worse than Giratina. I think Giratina, other than maybe Chandelure as a dual-type attacker, but Giratina is the best ghost type just by itself, I think, for raid battles. But the reason that I included all of these dark types as well is that dark types resist ghost type moves. So in the heads up, all 4 of these Pokemon are actually going to be able to challenge Giratina Origin Form in the Master League. So they might be something that you want to consider. They bring along a lot more weaknesses with them. I actually think of this group, Darkrai is definitely the best. He's got similar weaknesses and strengths to Giratina, but beats it in the heads-up matchup because of that resistance. One other pseudo-ghost type Pokemon that I mentioned in the article is Mewtwo. And Mewtwo has the same uses as the ghost and dark type Pokemon if it's got that Shadow Ball moveset. Obviously, it might have Psy Strike 2 or no exclusive moves and like an Elemental Mewtwo. But for the most part, Mewtwo in raid battles is going to be a pseudo-ghost type Pokemon. Obviously, we just had Armored Mewtwo return, and that's one of the reasons that I'm also highlighting Mewtwo here. If you're short manning, if you're pineapping on these legendary raid battles, well, you might have a bunch more Mewtwo candy than you did 2 weeks ago. So a Mewtwo for PvP, unlocking that second charge move is a decent place to spend it on. I've often talked about Mewtwo as like the new generalist. You unlock a second charge move on it, and then you're able to use that Ice Beam or that Thunderbolt in raid battles because you already have a Mewtwo powered up. Mewtwo, I think, is the Pokemon that benefits the most in raid battles, other than some other Pokemon that also have exclusive limited movesets. But Mewtwo with a second charge move, you do need the second charge move on Mewtwo if you really want to use it in PvP. You can kind of get away with just Psy Strike, and you can kind of get away with just Shadow Ball, but you're really selling yourself short, and like I said, that second charge move is also going to be useful in raid battles, so you might as well unlock it. And once you have unlocked those moves, I will talk a little bit about movesets for Mewtwo because they are so important. So you either want to go Psy Strike plus Ice Beam or Shadow Ball plus Focus Blast. Either of those two combinations gives you a really, really good type coverage across the field. And then with those moves unlocked, Mewtwo becomes a really good Pokemon. There's a few really good things that you can do with it in the Master League, mainly as a closer. Once nobody has any shields, then Mewtwo's really good. And then also as a safe switch, which means you switch into Mewtwo when your leading Pokemon has a bad matchup. Because Mewtwo has the type coverage for everything else, and now it has a little bit of an energy lead, at the very least, you'll be able to take a shield off of anything that switches into you because of that great type coverage that I was talking about. Another really good Pokemon that you probably just got a whole bunch of candy for is Rhyperior from Rhyperior's Community Day. Rhyperior is really, really good in the Master League, and it's also good in raid battles. Obviously, that's the whole topic of this video. Why do I keep saying that? Because it has that exclusive move. Again, you probably are going to want to unlock a second charge move on Rhyperior. There also is a saving grace for people that powered up a Rhyperior before it had the legacy move added. You could probably get away with like Surf, Earthquake. Really, Rhyperior has a bunch of good movesets. I actually think they're pretty much any combination of either Mud Slap and Smackdown plus Rock Wrecker, Earthquake, Surf, and Superpower. Any combination of all of those moves can all be really good, but you do have to tailor it to the weaknesses and strengths of your team. So depending on what you think threatens your team, you might have to alter what moves your Rhyperior is using specifically. For raid battles, obviously, not only is Rhyperior really good, we've got it as a 1.5 on the attackers tier list as well, but it's also really good right now. It was just good against Tornadus. If you didn't power up a Rhyperior for the 1 or 2 days after Community Day to use against Tornadus, it's also good against Thundurus right now. It'll be good against Lugia, and then also Tornadus and Thundurus. Just something to keep in mind. Both of those Pokemon are probably going to come back in their alternate forms, so you'll get double the use out of powering up this guy, and it's on 2 of them, so you're getting double to double, and yeah, Rhyperior is just really good. One of the videos that I have coming out after this, or it's probably up already right now as you're watching this, is a video where I use Giratina, Mewtwo, and Rhyperior in the Master League and manage a 9-1, almost manage a 10-0. But I wanted to really show, I think these Pokemon are some of the best investments right now if you don't already have them powered up. They are pretty accessible investments. Giratina might be a little bit tricky. He hasn't been around since October. You could potentially replace Giratina, like I said, with Darkrai and have it fill a pretty similar role. But not only are these Pokemon good and good investments, but they also are a pretty good cohesive team in the Master League. And you can switch really any of those Pokemon except for Giratina out with the next Pokemon that we're going to talk about, and that's Mamoswine and the other Ice-type Pokemons in the Master League. They are good against Thundurus, which we currently have, and they're also doubly super effective against Landorus, a flying ground-type Pokemon, doubly weak to Ice, so double on those Ice-type Pokemon. You're definitely going to want to power up at least one of those. I'm not sure how difficult a doubly super effective legendary raid boss is going to be, but because it's so easy, that means powering up your team, easily being able to duo them, will just get you more rare candy when you start short manning. Cha-ching, you see what I'm saying? Get those rewards, make those investments, and then you'll have the resources to start powering up your Giratinas or your Darkrai's and your other Pokemon. So Ice-type Pokemon are really interesting in the Master League, and they're kind of an untapped potential here. Weavile isn't as good because its Dark type makes it weak to Charm from Togekiss, but otherwise, Ice-type Pokemon are able to take on the top 3 threats in the Master League. So those 3 threats are the Dragon Duo, which are Giratina and then Dialga, which I'm going to talk about next, plus Togekiss, which is the only Pokemon other than Ice types which take on those 2 Dragon Boys. So having access to Ice-type Pokemon, sometimes your opponent just won't really have any good answers to them. Dialga can still, handle them somewhat with Iron Head, its Steel-type move, and Mamoswine, though, being a ground type, won't take super effective damage from that. Mamoswine's still a little bit frail, but then Mamoswine also gets to hit Dialga specifically back with Bulldoze. So all in all, these ice types are just really good both for raids and in PvP. These ice type Pokemon are also going to be decent against Lugia when that returns this month. So all in all, I think these ice types are really good. They're really good right now. None of these are legendary Pokemon either, which can be a little bit of a concern if you're trying to figure out what to invest in. But they're good this month. They're going to be a must-have next month. So might as well power up one or two, and you'll be able to use them in the Master League as well. These next Pokemon that I'm going to talk about, I don't feel are as useful in raids right now, but they're still really good in raids as a whole for the most part, and they are highly ranked on the Attackers tier list, but they're also really highly ranked on the Master League tier list, and they'll still have some raid utility if you do decide to power them up. So, Dialga. Dialga is one of the pillars of the Master League format. I couldn't get through that first section without even mentioning it in almost every other Pokemon that I talked about. Basically, the format for Master League revolves around what beats Dialga and everything else that doesn't. And Dialga is just so good. Most of the Pokemon in the league will be able to take out just using its fast move, and it's also really, really good in raids. You might have not powered up a Dialga, and I understand that. The main reason that people can't afford to power up a Dialga is they've already powered up like 4 Rayquaza, and they don't want to power up a worse Dragon-type Pokemon when they've already got a team of 6. However, where Dialga becomes more or less necessary is when you're fighting against Dragon-type Pokemon that have Draco Meteor. You need a, high DPS option that can tank a Draco Meteor and survive. You can try to dodge it, sure, but Rayquaza can dodge it and still get hit by it a little bit and still faint sometimes. So for that reason, with Dialga's Steel type bringing a Dragon resistance, Dialga's really good. And again, that same thing that I brought up as far as Giratina is concerned. Yes, Dialga might be a little bit more on the tankier side and not offer the same DPS as those other options, but when your Dialga is going to last the same amount as 2 or 3 Rayquaza, you're definitely getting your Stardust worth, and you're definitely getting your rare candy worth, and for the Master League, you are definitely getting your worth there, because Rayquaza is just not good. It doesn't have the bulk to be able to compete, especially because everybody's running Dialga, and Dialga will just shred those Rayquaza that try to show up. And we do have a Dragon-type return this month. And when I say this month, obviously that's for the people watching this in March. You might be watching it in June, July, when Master League returns, potentially. But if you're watching it now, I'm talking about March's bonus month of raid legendary returns or whatever. Just throw a bunch of events at it. That'll shut them up. So yeah, Giratina is one of those legendary Pokemon returning, and Dialga is good against Giratina in raids, and it's good against Giratina in PvP. Giratina is good because it beats everything that beats Dialga for, aside from Ice types and Togekiss, but Dialga's really, really strong, and I call them the Dragon Duo, Giratina and Dialga. But Dialga beats Giratina. So, yeah, there's kind of one clear winner for best Pokemon in the Master League, and that's Dialga. So at least make sure you are ready to take on opposing Dialgas, because it is pretty good. But you can also just play it yourself, and it's pretty good. The next Pokemon is another kind of pillar of the format. It's in the top 4, probably the 3rd best Pokemon in the league, because it does challenge that Dragon Duo, and that's Togekiss. And Togekiss is honestly in kind of an interesting spot. I kind of felt like I had to include it in this article and video because it is just so good in the Master League, but it's not actually on the attackers tier list. It's like a artificial tier 5 Pokemon, but just isn't quite good enough to make the actual attackers tier list. And what sold me on it was they're bringing back Darkrai this month, and Togekiss can actually answer Darkrai. It's not as good as the fighting type counters, but it can definitely tank a Focus Blast from Darkrai, so having Togekiss in your raid arsenal is pretty good. Other than that, its raid use is pretty limited. It can fill a similar role to Dialga in that it can tank a Draco Meteor or, sometimes Dragon Claws or whatever in the case of Giratina Altered Form coming back this month. Though Togekiss as a whole, probably you won't get too much use out of it in raid battles, though I will say the fact that it's boosted in cloudy weather, which I think is a pretty common weather type in everywhere except for Morocco, you do get some use out of Togekiss in that regard too. But really, just because Togekiss is so good against Giratina, so good against Dialga, that's really what justifies its 5 out of 5 rating on our Master League tier list, despite the fact that you might not use it in that many raid battles. A Pokemon that you will use in a lot of raid battles, though, is Kyogre. And surprisingly, Kyogre doesn't have any additional uses this month for our return of legendary raid bosses, but even having said that, I still think, and exclusive future legacy moves aside, Kyogre is one of the best investments in the game because it is just the premier water-type Pokemon in Pokemon Go for both raids and PvP. Kyogre actually really struggles against the Dragon Duo. It loses to both Giratina and Darkrai, and that should write it out of the format completely, except it beats everything else, and it beats all of these things that are put there to counter your Giratinas and your Dialgas. If Pokemon Go PvP was only a 1 Pokemon or a 2 Pokemon format, then honestly, yeah, you probably would still wind up using Kyogre a decent amount of the time, as I think it's a great lead Pokemon too, because it catches all of those Pokemon that are there hunting for that Dragon Duo. It is going to beat the Togekiss. It's going to beat, I think, every Pokemon that I'm going to talk about from here until the rest of the article. Actually, when we get to the end, we'll see some Pokemon that can challenge Kyogre specifically, but all in all, Kyogre is just a really, really good resource. And more than that, Kyogre, I'm betting, is probably one that you already have powered up. It's pretty hard unless you're brand new into the game. If you've been playing for a little bit, you definitely already have a Kyogre. And great news, it's fantastic in the Master League. So, yeah, I would say that Kyogre, Giratina, and Dialga, that 3 Pokemon, is probably one of the most common sets of 3 that you'll play against in the Master League, and for good reason. It's really fantastic. Really strong Pokemon. Now that it has Surf, that is important. If you haven't used your Kyogre in a little bit, you might not have noticed that it got Surf as an additional charge move, but it's not Legacy, so you can TM it. TM your Kyogres from Hydro Pump over to Surf. That'll make them better in both raids and in PvP. You can also unlock additional moves on Kyogre, and what's interesting is a lot of legendary Pokemon have these coverage moves. And they're moves that made them awkward to fight against in raid battles, and, it was like, curse you, Kyogre, for having Blizzard and destroying all of my Rosalias. But now Kyogre can use that Blizzard, and, well, it's probably not going to be destroying Rosalias in the Master League, but it's good against both of those Dragon types to provide some coverage of the Pokemon that would counter Kyogre. You can also take Thunder on it, which helps in the Kyogre v Kyogre mirror matchup. I personally like Blizzard but that is going to depend on what your team is. If your team is weak to Kyogre, your Kyogre might want to run Thunder and just get a leg up in that mirror matchup there. So really, really recommend Kyogre. It's fantastic. You already know it's good in raids, and it's just as good in PvP. Another Pokemon, though this one might be a little bit more of a sell in raid battles, is Metagross. Now, Metagross is basically the only Steel-type Pokemon that is worth using as a Steel-type attacker. Obviously, we have Dialga, which is a Steel-type, but you don't use it as a Steel-type in raids, you use it as a Dragon-type. Because of that, Metagross kind of has its own niche, though it hasn't been super impactful. You can use it in Togetic raids, and there's been a few other things. I'm trying to think, like probably the Regirock and Registeel, or Regice, I mean. So there's been a few things where Metagross is good, and I'm sure there's been another one. I personally, I've only powered up one Metagross, and I can imagine a lot of other people's collections out there haven't powered up a Metagross, but Metagross is really good in PvP and in raid battles. Specifically in raid battles, there's not much that's really challenging it. Aside from like exclusive moves, Metagross with that Meteor Mash, nothing else is really coming close to that, so it winds up being a pretty safe investment, though like I said, a lot of times with Pokemon Go, you want to power up what you need when you need it. So Metagross and other Steel types as a whole in the Master League are going to threaten Dialga because Dialga's dragon moves are resisted, and then they're also going to threaten Togekiss that are trying to beat Dialga. So they occupy a pretty important space in the metagame, and Metagross is, you know, they all have trade-offs, and they all have moves that can also be used to cover the other Steel types. Meltan has Superpower, and Metagross has Earthquake, so they're all pretty good in the Master League. How good they are in raids is kind of up to your discretion, though, yeah, you will definitely get use out of it, and it's a pretty good Pokemon in the Master League. Heatran is the other Steel type, and it is a Steel-type Pokemon, though it's not really a Steel-type Pokemon in raid content, and it does wind up functioning the same as a Steel-type Pokemon in PvP, though, because it's going to beat Metagross, it's going to beat Dialga, and because it's using fire moves mostly, it is actually going to be able to threaten the other Steel types in PvP. Now, Heatran is another one like Kyogre that got a better move after it was already released for the first time, so you might miss the fact that Heatran is actually not that terrible in raid battles, and not that terrible isn't exactly the best endorsement, but it is so good in Master League that it is, you know, it is worthwhile to bring it up. We are going to see it be useful in Cobalion raids as a Fire-type Pokemon, and Heatran, and this is going to be similar with a lot of Pokemon that you notice are good in the Master League, you need attack and you need bulk. And Heatran is really that bulky Fire-type. And powering up something like that, like this one actually has a significant DPS drop-off from the things like Moltres, Blaziken, and the like, but it has such a bigger TDO that you definitely wind up benefiting from powering one up. And fire types actually, surprisingly, aren't that useful in raid battles. And because of that, I actually think that makes Heatran a better choice of Pokemon to power up. Because you're not going to be using them that often, like ghost types you use all the time. So really powering up like that Gengar makes a lot more sense because you're just going to get so much use out of it that it really is worthwhile. But Heatran and the other fire types you're really not going to get that much use out of, so skimping on Stardust a little bit there by powering up the more TDO efficient option, I actually think can do starting up trainers really well, or trainers that haven't invested in a fire team yet and aren't sure which option to go with. So I do think that Heatran is definitely worth looking at, and in PvP, obviously it's going to lose super hard to Kyogre, but it will definitely crush all of those steel types and the Togekisses that you'll come across. The next two groups of Pokemon are pretty similar, each with their own trade-offs, but those are going to be the fighting and ground type Pokemon. Now, fighting type Pokemon, I shouldn't have to sell you on for raid battles. You should know those are insane. They're great in gyms. You've been using them since the beginning. They're good against almost every tier 4 raid other than Togetic, which you have Metagross for. And upcoming, they're going to be really good against Darkrai raids and Cobalion raids as well. Also, yeah, they're good in EX raids, and I did want to touch on this a little bit when I brought up fighting types, but some people, you know, they get to an EX raid and there's 17 people there, and you don't really need to power up Pokemon for an EX raid because there's always going to be enough people there, or unless, you know, Niantic does it at 2 o'clock on a Monday, at which case you're just going with the 6 people that show up or what have you, but even still, in those cases, say 10 people show up to an EX raid, if you've got your Machamps powered up and everybody else does, go ahead and split. Offer that to people. And I'm sure there will be people willing to take that up. Sometimes I know people want to build friendships and things too, and I understand that. Try to see if you can get any lucky friends or just get some more experience points out of the raid. That all makes sense too, but just because it's an EX raid doesn't mean you can't split, and, you know, you've already got those fighting types powered up. If you don't already have a fighting type powered up, pause this video right now. I'll still be here. Go pause the video. Go power up a Machamp or a Lucario or whatever you got. Trust me, it's just going to make gyms so much easier if you ever struggle with gyms. I'm assuming because you are probably a lower level player. But these fighting type Pokemon just pay dividends in raids and are really, really good. So, and because it's good against Cobalion, I should mention it's also good against Terrakion, which is probably going to return soon since Cobalion just returned. Didn't really think about too much other returning things as I wrote the article. That's kind of a crapshoot. But fighting types, as we get to them in PvP, they are really, really good against the steel type. Steel has 2 weaknesses: fighting and ground, so that's why I've kind of brought them up here and grouped them together. Both of these things, fighting types can really, really challenge the big boss Dialga. However, Giratina is going to completely wall these fighting type Pokemon. Togekiss, as a flying fairy type Pokemon, is going to completely wall these fighting type Pokemon. And what that means is the fighting types, they'll just sit there punching away, and the Giratina, you know, throws out some Shadow Claws. The Togekiss throws out some Charms. They really don't care. You're not going to deal that much damage to them, and they're going to take you down. So because of that reason, you have to be really careful switching into the fighting type Pokemon. But they can be really good because they challenge all of the steel types, including Heatran. So it's, you know, a whole nother level kind of in that aspect. But you can get next level too by Giratina and Togekiss, the other pillars of the format. The thing that I'll mention here, though, too, is Machamp being able to unlock Rock Slide to at least have something for Togekiss is pretty good, having that extra move. And I think Hariyama can do Bullet Punch, I want to say, which would also threaten Togekiss. So unlocking additional moves on both of those Pokemon can be really beneficial. And I guess Lucario has Shadow Ball, right, for Giratina? I don't know Conkeldur's moves, but it's not as good as the other three. You know what? I'll look up the moves here live. Let's do it. Let's do it live. I don't know Conkeldurr off the top of my head. Okay, it has Stone Edge. So Stone Edge is going to be a little bit more expensive energy-wise than Rock Slide, but it still has access to it. That's nice. So all of these Pokemon probably want their secondary move if they want to be able to challenge other things that switch into them and otherwise just wall them so well. Then you'll be able to at least deal some damage or get a shield to that Pokemon that counters you. And yeah, that can help swing a match for sure. Pretty similar, like I said, to fighting types because they also deal super effective damage to steel types are the ground type Pokemon. They're also going to be Cobalion and Terrakion counters, though they probably need a clear weather boost to really be useful. Ground type Pokemon are awkward. They're not the best in raids, and honestly, I think Groudon is potentially the worst out of these ground type Pokemon. And that's actually reflected in our attackers tier list too. You don't really wind up using ground type Pokemon that much. Though when you do need it against either electric types or against Heatran, where it's doubly super effective, you really do want ground type Pokemon, so you might have a Groudon powered up somewhat. If you don't already, I definitely recommend one of the other options, either Garchomp so that you can also use it as a dragon attacker, but who really has a Garchomp? The best ones are going to be Rhyperior, which I already mentioned in his own section, then also Swampert, as long as you have that Community Day Hydro Cannon. It's going to be a great water type, and it's going to be you know what, it's not going to be that great of a... It's really just a water type in raid content, but it will be kind of both in PvP. Swampert also is going to beat all the other ground types for what it's worth, because it is part water type, so it'll be able to threaten Groudon, Rhyperior, and Garchomp pretty well. I think Garchomp just takes neutral damage from it. Garchomp might actually beat Swampert. I don't know that off the top of my head, but in PvP, like I said, they do a pretty similar role to the fighting types. They beat all the steals. They still lose to Giratina, though they can at least deal some damage to it, and they get walled hard still by Togekiss because the ground is double resistant to, or flying types are double resistant to the ground type moves. Swampert will mostly just be, you know, throwing out water type moves. Rhyperior, I guess, will try to get a rock move off. That's why I also said Rhyperior has a lot of different move sets that work with it. You really can use any combination of moves there for him. But the ground types do still have that spot in the metagame. Like I said, Heatran is a pretty good Pokemon in PvP, and one of the best uses for ground types in raid battles is for Heatran raids. So if you can remember that, then okay, obviously you can just destroy Heatrans that show up in PvP if you happen to be using one of your ground types. So ground types do have a use. They're not that great in raid battles. They're decent in PvP. I thought they were going to be a lot bigger part of the metagame because a lot of people should be using those steel types, but all of this just kind of depends what people are using, what trends that you see, and then trying to capitalize on those trends. So we'll see what trends persist and develop as the Master League continues here. And there are actually some other flying type Pokemon in the Master League that we haven't really talked about. Dragonite in particular is an excellent Pokemon for raiding. It's basically the same as Rayquaza or Salamence. It's a little bit lower, and a little bit lower than Palkia even, but honestly it had a community day if you were playing back then, and Dragonite is, you know, just as good as those other dragons, only a little bit worse. But the fact that it doesn't use any rare candy definitely makes it a worthwhile investment. Now in PvP, Dragonite is something that can threaten a Giratina. with those Dragon-type moves, and it fires off the charge moves really quick, so it's going to be able to burn a lot of shields in neutral matchups. It's not really going to be good against the Steel-type Pokemon that can resist it, but the Fightings and Grounds and Kyogre, it'll be decent against all of those. And basically, it's just a trade-off. You probably don't want to run a team that has both Dialga and Giratina and Dragonite. Then if you face up against a Togekiss, you're just looking to be charmed down. But Dragonite can definitely be a useful Pokemon in PvP, and one that you already have powered up. And you'll notice Rayquaza, Salamence, Palkia, those Pokemon aren't on this list. They aren't in this video, they aren't in this article, and I would actually say to a new player right now, if they're saying, which Dragon-type Pokemon should I power up? Well, if they don't have Dialga, they should go for Dragonite, because Dragonite's also going to be that much more useful because of its ability to spam those fast moves and charge moves in PvP. That's definitely where you're going to want to go with your Stardust investment, and I think it's a much better investment than Rayquaza and Salamence, which are technically better in raid battles. The other flying-type Pokemon is Gyarados. And Gyarados has a pretty interesting raid history. For a while, it functioned as a Dark-type Pokemon that didn't get hit by a Focus Blast. And it was also a Dragon-type Pokemon that didn't take super effective damage from Dragon moves, similar to how I brought that up with Dialga earlier. Then Gyarados finally got access to Waterfall and could be used as an actual water-type Pokemon, and that's its best use now in raid battles. And this is that same tanky argument that I've brought up a few times before, and it might not seem like, Gyarados isn't more tanky than Kyogre, but because of that flying type, it can completely avoid an Earthquake, and more importantly, it can avoid a Solar Beam from Groudon. So if you are doing Groudon raids, that's 2 out of its 3 movesets. So 2/3 of the time, more often than not, it's going to be the best Water-type Pokemon because it's able to dodge those charge moves from a Groudon. In PvP, Gyarados is going to reprise his role as a Dragon-type Pokemon, and it'll be in a pretty similar space to Dragonite that I just talked about. Basically, it uses those Dragon-type moves, it won't take super effective damage from the other dragons, so it's really there to beat Giratina and Dragonite. But powering it up, you'll have to TM it when you decide to use it for raids. Like I said, you don't need a Kyogre right now, you don't need a Gyarados right now, but you could still power it up. It will be useful in raid battles for the foreseeable future, and it is going to be pretty good in the Master League. Gets a 3 out of 5 rating. It's not really, we're not talking about the cream of the crop anymore, but it's still definitely a Pokemon that you can use to a good degree in either forms of content. The last Pokemon that we are going to talk about are the electric types. Now, electric types are really, really good in raid battles. Sometimes electric-type Pokemon, even while not weather-boosted, can best grass-type Pokemon. They're just that good. Everything that has, Wild Charge is pretty insane. And for the Master League, Zapdos, Raikou, Magnezone, they all wind up being pretty good. I think Raikou winds up being the best because it has Shadow Ball, which it can use to have coverage against Giratina. But electric types, the main point of those, if you think about I'll throw up Swagtip's graphic here, and you can see that the electric types are there to cover Kyogre and Togekiss. So electric types, even though electrics are only super effective against water and flying, and that's a pretty narrow pool, no pun intended, but those do represent 2 of the pillars of the Master League format with the Kyogre and the Togekiss. So because of that, you can get a pretty decent surprise out of people using electric types. If you're facing a lot of Kyogre leads and a lot of Togekiss leads, then you might want an electric type. on the whole, they're not really that great in the Master League. We give them all a 3.5 out of 5 on the Master League tier list there. But, you know, they're still pretty good. That's it. That's all I got for you guys. I think I gave you enough. I don't know how many Pokemon I've talked about today. This has been a pretty long video as well, but I hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to have some more Master League content and Go Battle League content in general coming up soon. Like I said, there is a companion video to this companion video as well, where I showcase Giratina, Mewtwo, and Rhyperior to a 9-1 record in the Master League, so check that out if you haven't already. I might also do one more Master League video before the preseason is over with, but I also actually have some Great League content. I recorded some Great League content, and then Niantic was like, oh hey, it's Ultra League now, and I didn't really have the chance to release that, but I'm going to go back and release that before Season 1 starts, which we're pretty sure is going to be Great League again. So if you want to see that, hit subscribe, leave a like as well if you enjoyed it, and comment down below to let me know what you want to see in the future. I've got, like I said, a lot of these Pokemon powered up already, so if you want to see some silly teams, suggest them, and yeah, just let me know what you want to see, either in the comments or on Reddit, on Twitter, or on Gamepress.gg itself. That's going to be it, guys, for me today. Thank you very much for watching. I'm NoLucksGiven. Peace.